Hi there. My name's Larissa. And this? This was supposed to be just a will reading. But instead, my own family laughed when they announced I was left with nothing, not a cent, not even my name in the will. They called me unfit, said I abandoned them. But the worst part? They planned it, together, long before I walked into that room. And just when I thought I had no voice left, my daughter stood up and said 7 words that made the whole room fall silent. The air inside my mother's parlor room felt like the kind of silence that precedes a tornado. Skylar squeezed my hand as we stepped inside, her fingers smaller than I remembered. Darlene was already seated at the center of the long oak table like a judge waiting to pass sentence. Her smile wasn't warm, it was practiced, like she'd been rehearsing it in the mirror all morning. The smell of lemon polish mixed with tension. My Aunt Irene gave me a once-over and didn't bother hiding her disapproval. Some cousins nodded, but it wasn't kindness, it was protocol. This wasn't a family reunion. This was a verdict. Holcomb, the family lawyer, shuffled papers as though he hadn't already made up his mind about me years ago. I caught his eyes, neutral but not kind, and took a deep breath before finding a seat at the end of the table, far from Darlene's perfectly manicured hands and laser-focused stare. He cleared his throat. "To Darlene Doyle," he began, "goes the primary residence and all its assets." Darlene didn't even blink. Of course she knew. She always knew. To Irene Doyle, a monthly stipend and antique heirlooms of Ramona's choosing. I didn't flinch. Not yet. I had braced myself. Then Holcomb flipped a page and paused, only for half a second. "And to Larissa Doyle, nothing." The sound of my name followed by silence hit harder than any slap. The room stirred with whispers. Someone laughed quietly, probably one of the cousins who hadn't spoken to me in a decade. Darlene leaned in just enough for only me to hear her. "Guess Mom finally cut her losses." Skylar's hand clenched mine tighter. I gave her a soft smile to shield her from the humiliation bleeding out of me like an open wound. My jaw tightened. I didn't look at Darlene. I couldn't. If I did, I might lose the control I'd worked so hard to keep. Then came Irene. I mean, really? What kind of mother walks out and thinks she can just walk back in? That's not how family works. I didn't answer. I stayed still, let her words hover like flies. Darlene smirked and turned her gaze toward Skylar. "Poor girl. You deserve better than this woman. We all tried, but she chose to run." I snapped my head toward her, but stopped short of speaking. "Not here. Not yet. You came for the truth," I reminded myself. Not for their approval. Not for scraps. I kept my voice inside, swallowed the anger, and placed my free hand on Skylar's back, grounding myself in her warmth. Holcomb flipped the next page of the will. The sound echoed too loud in the still room. Darlene leaned toward me again and whispered, sharp as broken glass, "Mom made sure people like you disappear, and she did a damn good job." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. But my mind wasn't still, not after hearing her say it like that, with such satisfaction. I could feel Skylar shifting beside me, sensing the shift in me, sensing the heat crawling under my skin. Holcomb cleared his throat again, louder this time, but I noticed the slight hesitation in his fingers as he turned to the next page. A flicker of doubt? Or just nerves? I couldn't tell. But in that second, something clicked. He used to golf with my ex-husband, every other Sunday. They shared drinks, cheap advice, and complaints about their wives. I had forgotten that, buried it under years of survival. Now here he was, holding my name in one hand and my erasure in the other. Darlene leaned back in her chair like she owned the building. Her voice was syrupy and smug. "Since Larissa clearly wants to be part of the family again," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "we might as well address the elephant in the room." She turned toward the door and nodded once. It opened, and in walked Miss Kellis, Skylar's old kindergarten teacher. I hadn't seen her in years. "This is a bit unconventional," Darlene added with a laugh, "but it's important to understand patterns of behavior." I sat straighter but said nothing. Miss Kellis gave me a polite nod, then looked around the room. Yes, I was Skylar Doyle's teacher. I remember her well. Sweet girl. But her mother was difficult to reach. She missed multiple meetings, left Skylar with neighbors often. At times, it felt like Skylar raised herself. The air thickened. Irene nodded like a church deacon backing a sermon. A few cousins leaned in, hungry for more. Holcomb stayed quiet, eyes on the carpet. Skylar looked at me, confused. I didn't look away. I couldn't. They were using my past as a weapon, but they didn't know the full story. She remembers one version, I thought. I lived the other. Back then, Skylar had asthma attacks weekly. I worked night shifts to pay rent on a one-bedroom apartment with a heater that barely worked. I made peanut butter sandwiches stretch 2 days. I kept her breathing, clothed, loved, even when my own mother shut the door in my face. I didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, I stood, walked over to the pitcher, poured Skylar a glass of water, and returned. My face was unreadable. My silence wasn't shame. It was strategy. The noise in the room dulled. They were expecting tears, a tantrum, a crack in the armor. But I gave them nothing. That, more than any outburst, made them uncomfortable. The room stayed still, but I could sense something shifting, like when you're standing on a dock and feel the tide pull beneath the planks. Holcomb tried to move on, but Darlene wasn't finished. She stood slowly, folding her arms, her voice loud enough to hush the whispers. "We're not just talking about morals anymore," she said. "We're talking theft." My chest tightened. She took money from Mom, asked the bank. Gasps, one soft curse from the back, and then silence. Irene didn't hesitate to pile on. There was an account that went negative out of nowhere. Thousands gone. We stayed quiet, for Mom's sake. She didn't want it public. My throat dried, but I didn't speak. Not yet. Holcomb glanced at me, then back down. That silence said enough. Darlene handed him a bank printout like it was a bomb wrapped in fax. "Here, 2016. Withdrawal. $4,000. Labeled household expenses." I didn't need to look. I remembered the day. The line at the pharmacy, the motel parking lot, Skylar's fever, the inhaler I couldn't afford. But they'd stripped all that away. Context erased. "She drained the account, then ran off," Darlene continued. "Let's stop pretending this is about grief." One of the cousins murmured, "Guess she cashed out before the will was even cold." No one laughed this time. They were watching me too closely, waiting to see if I'd break. I blinked, and I was back there again. It was raining hard. My ex slammed the front door after screaming so loud Skylar woke up gasping. She was 2. I wrapped her in my coat and drove, shaking the entire way. I pulled into Mom's driveway, knocked. She opened the door, looked at me, and then passed me like I wasn't there. "You left your vows," she said flatly. "You don't belong here." Then she closed the door. That night, I kept Skylar warm in the car, parked behind a Waffle House. I used the last of my tips to buy gas, baby formula, and cough syrup. 3 weeks later, I got my first paycheck from the nursing home. That money? It bought us time to survive. It didn't come from greed. It came from desperation. Back in the room, I met Darlene's eyes and smiled, not kindly. "Tell them what you spent Mom's inheritance on in 2018, I said, voice steady. "Or should I?" Darlene didn't even blink. She let out a short theatrical laugh that bounced off the crown molding. "Oh, please. We all know you love throwing mud when you're cornered." She turned to Holcomb and raised her voice for effect. "And I'll have my attorney file an injunction first thing Monday if this little circus keeps going." It was classic Darlene. When truth got too close, she threw legal smoke. Irene stood, not missing a beat. "This isn't about legacy anymore. This is about protecting the family from slander and shame." She looked around the room like she expected applause. All she got was more silence and a few eyes darting away. I stood slowly. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "If I wanted to sling mud, Darlene," I said, "I'd start with your second mortgage. Or maybe the wellness retreat in Arizona you wrote off as elder care while Mom was in the hospital." A sharp inhale rippled through the room. Even Holcomb froze for a beat. Darlene's expression cracked for just a second, then snapped back into place. "You're bluffing." I stepped toward the table. "Try me." Skylar shifted closer to me. Her fingers brushed against my arm, but her eyes didn't leave Darlene. I didn't let up. "You want to drag this into court? Fine, let's take it there. Just don't pretend you control the story anymore." Holcomb cleared his throat, loud this time. "Let's all stay civil. The estate proceedings don't need to become litigious. Darlene leaned toward Irene and whispered, "She thinks this is over. She has no idea what's coming." I heard it. Without turning, I said calmly, "Keep pushing, Darlene. You won't like what happens when I push back." That got her attention. She stood, slow and deliberate, and met my eyes with something that almost looked like respect, but not quite. Her voice dropped to a simmer. "Then push, sis." For a second, we just stared at each other, two sisters locked in a decades-long war, now face to face at its ugliest hour. The room had gone so quiet, even the ticking of the antique wall clock sounded like a drumbeat. Then came a voice I didn't expect. "Grandma said this would happen. Watch this." I turned just in time to see Skylar rise from her chair. She stood tall, her chin slightly trembling but her voice clear. She walked calmly toward her backpack, unzipped it, and pulled out a small envelope. The silence cracked. Skylar stepped toward Holcomb and handed it to him with both hands. He looked at it like it might explode. The name across the front was written in my mother's handwriting, sharp, precise. Underneath, "Play only if things turn ugly. If Larissa is hurt, this means it did." Darlene shifted in her chair. Irene's jaw tensed. "Where did you get this?" Holcomb asked gently. Skylar looked at me first, then answered. "She gave it to me after our last walk. She said I'd know when it was time." Holcomb peeled the flap open, revealing a USB drive and a folded note. He read the message again, slower this time. A hush fell across the room like fog. Darlene let out a forced laugh. "That could be fake." Holcomb raised one brow. "It's real. I recognize her handwriting, and per her instructions, I'm legally obligated to play it if this exact circumstance occurs." I couldn't breathe for a second. My hand instinctively reached for Skylar's. She squeezed it, steady, unshaken. "I trusted her," Skylar whispered to me. "She said the truth would outlive everything else." I nodded, barely able to speak. Darlene opened her mouth like she had something ready to strike, but for once nothing came out. Holcomb moved to the TV stand, pulled the small laptop from his bag, and inserted the USB. He adjusted his glasses and clicked the file. The screen blinked to life, blue light flickering across the faces of every person in the room. And then there she was. My mother, older, frailer, dressed in the sky blue cardigan I'd given her 2 birthdays ago. Her eyes looked straight into the camera, tired but certain. "Hi, Larissa." Her voice filled the room like thunder before the rain. "If you're watching this," my mother began, "then I'm gone. And if Larissa's in the room, I know exactly what's happening." No one moved, not even Darlene. On screen, Mom sat straighter, her frail shoulders wrapped in the navy sweater I gave her before her last hospital stay. Her hands were folded in front of her, a tissue clenched tight between them. "I believed the wrong people," she said plainly. "I didn't listen to the right one. I let pride become parenting. I let other voices drown out my own daughters." The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the laptop. The storm outside had crept closer. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the window. "Larissa," she continued, "I know I hurt you. I know you tried. And I know I made it harder than it had to be. But I saw what you did for Skylar. I saw how you kept going, even when no one believed you should." I blinked away the sting in my eyes. "I changed the will." The air snapped like a rubber band. "I left the house to you and Skylar, the savings, and I started a college fund in her name." There was an audible inhale from the couch. Darlene looked like someone had slapped her. Irene leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Holcomb, calm as ever, reached into his briefcase and placed a new folder on the table. This was signed and notarized 2 weeks before Ramona's passing. I witnessed it myself. Darlene shot up from her chair. She wasn't of sound mind. "She was lucid," Holcomb replied firmly. "Her physician confirmed her capacity in writing. Would you like to see the document?" I didn't speak. I turned instead to Skylar, brushing a curl behind her ear. "She saw us," I whispered. "Finally." Skylar smiled, and for the first time in hours, I let my shoulders relax. Darlene didn't sit. She leaned toward Irene and hissed low enough that only I could hear. "Then we destroy whatever she thinks she just won." The moment the screen went dark, Irene stood and walked briskly to the hallway. I could hear her heels click against the hardwood floor, sharp, urgent, like she was calling in backup. Minutes later, she returned with her phone held out like a weapon. "Dr. Myers on the line," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "Ramona's physician." Holcomb looked up, eyebrows pinched. "On speaker, please." The voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes, this is Dr. Meyer. I was Ramona Doyle's primary physician during her final year. In that period, she occasionally demonstrated confusion and mild short-term memory issues, common in late-stage patients." Darlene pounced. "So, just to clarify, doctor, you're saying she wasn't fully capable of making legal decisions?" A beat. "It's not that simple. She had moments of full lucidity, but that nuance didn't matter." "There it is," Darlene declared, like she'd won the lottery. "That second will is trash. It's invalid. She didn't even know what she was doing." Holcomb didn't move, didn't speak, but I saw it, the quiet clench of his jaw, the tightening of his shoulders. He was calculating. Then Darlene took it one step further. "And while we're here," she tossed a manila folder onto the table. "Let's talk about Larissa's past, since we're pretending she's some model of integrity." Inside, credit reports, missed payments, student loan defaults, a 2017 eviction. "She wants a house?" Darlene sneered. "She couldn't manage a studio apartment." For a moment I couldn't breathe. Skylar stared at the table, her small fingers gripping her dress. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I didn't lash out. "That was survival," I said quietly. "You don't know what it means to start over with a toddler, no help, and $26 in your account." Irene rolled her eyes. "Excuses." Holcomb cleared his throat. "Credit history is not a measure of moral character, Miss Doyle, and this isn't a financial tribunal." But I wasn't done. I turned to the room. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I've never stolen, never lied to this family, never begged for more than a sliver of decency. But I see now, you only ever respected silence or submission. I did neither." That struck. For the first time, the cousins shifted uncomfortably on Darlene's side. A few avoided eye contact. Then Skylar stood. She looked at me first, then at the room. "You forgot what she's survived," she said, steady and sure. But I didn't. The room didn't move. Not a breath shifted. Rain had begun ticking lightly against the windows, as if the house itself held its breath with us. Skylar took a quiet step forward. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn children's book. Corduroy. It had been her favorite when she was little. Now it was something more. She handed it to Holcomb. "There's something inside," she said softly. Holcomb opened the cover and found a folded piece of pale yellow stationery tucked in the middle. His brow furrowed as he unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Dated 4 weeks after the video," he announced. "To Skylar." He began to read. "If they hurt your mother, show this. She is the strongest woman I know. She did what I couldn't. She left when I was too afraid. I regret not standing by her sooner." Holcomb's voice caught. He looked up. No one spoke. "This isn't just about inheritance, it's about justice." The weight of those words flattened the room. Some cousins shifted away from Darlene. A few looked down at their laps. Irene sat stiff, her jaw clenched, though her hand trembled in her lap. Darlene snapped, "Anyone can write a note and date it. It doesn't prove anything." Holcomb folded the letter with care. "The ink matches Ramona's pen. The signature is hers. It's authentic." Irene tried to rise, but her knees buckled. A cousin helped steady her. No one else moved. I stood and looked at Darlene. Not with fire, not with gloating, just finality. "You weren't trying to protect Mom's memory," I said. "You were trying to protect your version of her, the one who never changed. But she did." Darlene didn't answer. Her hand twitched like she wanted to speak, wanted to fight, but there was nothing left to say. Holcomb cleared his throat. "Per Ramona Doyle's revised will and supplemental evidence, all assets transition to Larissa Doyle." No gasps, no applause, just the rustle of paper and the sound of Darlene's heels crossing the hardwood as she picked up her folder, turned toward the door, and walked out. Irene followed. Slower, heavier. Skylar settled back beside me. Her hand found mine again. "You did more for me than anyone ever has," I whispered. She looked up and smiled. She trusted me. Holcomb adjusted his glasses and glanced in my direction. There's just one more thing to sign, if you're ready. The morning air inside the house felt too still, like the walls had exhaled after holding their breath all night. Light filtered through the curtains, dull and quiet. It wasn't the kind of silence I remembered growing up here. This one didn't come with judgment. It came with peace. I moved slowly through the rooms. My hand grazed the old hall table, where a dusty crystal bowl still held faded peppermints. The hallway smelled faintly of Ramona's favorite lavender spray. I stepped into the living room. No voices, no glares, no watchful silence. Just space. I lowered myself into her chair, the one she never let anyone else use. For the first time, I didn't feel like an intruder. I sat back, let my fingers run along the soft armrest, and let the grief come. Not loud, not angry. Just there. Real, whole. Later, Holcomb knocked gently before entering. He held a manila folder in one hand, coffee in the other. "It's all official," he said. "Just needs your signature." I took the pen and paused. Did she know what this would cause? He looked down, nodding once. She didn't care. She said it was time something was finally right. After he left, Skylar came in with 2 mugs of tea. She set one beside me and curled up on the couch, legs tucked under. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at her. This child, this small, strong soul who held the line when no one else would. "You weren't just brave," I said. "You're the reason I kept standing." She shrugged gently. "I just said what needed saying." "Exactly," I whispered. "That's more than most grown-ups ever do." Outside, rain had stopped. The trees stood wet and quiet against the window panes. No more storms, just aftermath. We spent the rest of the day packing, not to erase the house, but to gather what mattered and leave what didn't. I didn't think of Darlene or Irene, not with anger, just nothing. I knew they'd never say sorry, but I also knew their silence didn't get to define me anymore. Skylar handed me a box marked photos. Inside, I found a picture of my mother, young, smiling, holding baby me. I didn't cry. I smiled back. She hadn't left me the house. She gave me my voice back. Before we close this chapter for good, there's something I want to leave with you, not just as the woman in this story, but as someone who walked through the fire and made it out standing. Sometimes, the justice we wait for doesn't come from courtrooms or signatures. It comes when we're finally seen, fully, without apology. For years, I thought silence made me strong. But strength, real strength, is choosing to speak when your voice shakes. It's standing tall, even when everyone's waiting for you to fall. If you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or told your story didn't matter, let this be your reminder. It does. You matter. You don't have to win the whole world over. Sometimes, you just need to hold your ground long enough for the truth to echo back. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been made to feel like your voice didn't belong in the room? What did you do? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something in you. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know. And hey, if this story didn't sit right with you, I welcome that too. Let me know why. Let's keep this real. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that speak to the cracks and courage in all of us, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that button so you don't miss what's next.